The Probatus of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The morning sun greeted Franklin through the crack in the hotel curtains. Partying into the early hours was common for someone in his position. After all, the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, appointed by the President of the United States, was just a stepping stone to much greater things. His mind drifted to the limitless possibilities in front of him. U.S. Senator, Governor of New York, maybe even President. A movement beside him broke his attention as a smooth and soft arm and leg rolled over on top of him. He smiled. This woman was his guilty pleasure, his righteous privilege. "Good morning, Lucy," he said, caressing her bare skin. "Sleep well?" She smiled drowsily back at him.
"How can I not sleep well after an evening like that?"
Her eyes twinkled in lustful seduction.
"I bet Eleanor never treated you so well."
"Oh, please, no need to bring my wife into this. You're going to ruin the mood." They kissed passionately and climbed out of bed. All the sneaking around to be alone was frustrating at times, but well worth the trouble. Franklin thoroughly inspected his uniform in the mirror, feeling his self-assurance and power build at the reflection of the handsome man. Lucy was his wife's secretary and often attended to Franklin.
"Shall I go out first this time?"
she asked. They were always careful not to be seen leaving anywhere together. "Sure. Remember, we're going for a sail this afternoon. I'll meet you at the docks." She smiled and kissed him before skipping out the door. Franklin walked back to the mirror and admired the formidable reflection one more time. "Nothing can stand in my way," he thought, and strode confidently to the door. After a lunch with a few statesmen, followed by the obligatory photo sessions, Franklin headed to the street where a car, provided by the government, was waiting for him. The United States was about to enter a war, bringing new pressure and influence to the young Assistant Secretary. Franklin directed the driver to the docks and sat back admiring the view. An afternoon of sailing was a selfish pleasure given the monumental decisions being made concerning the country. Still, he was important enough to demand an afternoon respite. Lucy waved from the sailboat tethered to the end of the pier, her bikini covered by a loose sweatshirt. She wore her wide-brimmed sun hat and movie-star sunglasses. Franklin strode nonchalantly toward her and stepped aboard. After just a few minutes of preparation, they cast off and quickly pulled eastward into the open ocean. The afternoon sun was strong, and the 2-foot waves were gently bouncing the boat along, the constant breeze making the job much easier. Both Franklin and Lucy settled back and watched the coastline go by for a few miles out. Life was good. The afternoon sun began to retreat into the evening sky.
"Do you think those clouds will give us trouble?"
Lucy asked. "What clouds?"
"There,"
she said, pointing to the south. Franklin twisted to see a large black thunderhead moving fast in their direction. "That's odd. They said there would be clear weather all afternoon," he said, feeling a sudden change in the breeze. A cold, cutting wind pushed the boat to the side, making the sail flap wildly. Franklin quickly adjusted the boom, and the mainsail grabbed the new wind and leaned the boat heavily. Lucy let out a gasp in surprise and renewed her grasp on the rail. "We better head back before that hits us," he yelled over the increasing wind and waves. The boat pulled around and fought to make headway toward shore against the storm. Waves, now over 6 feet, crashed over the railing, drenching them both. The black clouds of isolated storm replaced the sky above them, while the setting sun in the west produced an eerie light. Franklin had been in storms like this before, and knew to keep his calm. Land was only a few miles away after all. Franklin worked the sails hard and kept the rudder, moving them toward shore. He glanced at Lucy, who was trying to pull out a life jacket from the seat while keeping one arm wrapped tightly around the rail. Blackness that merged the water to the sky filled his view to the south. Only the white cresting waves were illuminated by the rapidly setting sun. His hands froze and his mouth opened in a silent scream as a 20-foot rogue wave headed straight for them. With a last look to Lucy, still struggling with the life jacket, the back of the boat lifted up in the air and they plunged deep into the cold water. Franklin tumbled underwater as the waves crashed over him. He cleared the surface and filled his lungs with fresh air as another wave crashed him back under the water. The urge to cough consumed him, but somehow he managed to hold his breath. Again, he broke the surface and caught a glimpse of blonde hair just a few feet from him. Lucy thrashed wildly as she only had one arm through the life jacket. Another wave pushed Franklin under, and the realization hit him that he was going to drown. Back on the surface, he searched frantically for Lucy. The sun, still lighting the black water, made her markedly stand out. Kicking hard with his feet, he pulled himself to her and grabbed the back of the jacket.
"Franklin, help me!"
she screamed as another wave pushed them both under. Bobbing back to the surface, Franklin grabbed the jacket tightly and kicked hard against Lucy, the jacket pulling away from her. She screamed in terror as another wave pulled her farther away from him.
"What are you doing?"
she yelled, a look of dread on her face. Franklin had managed to pull both arms into the jacket. His eyes met hers as the click of the clasp locked it in place.
"Why?"
she yelled. "Because I am more important. I will remember your sacrifice forever," he replied, and her hazel eyes disappeared beneath the waves. Lightning flashed, and she was gone. Immediately the storm faded and the sea became eerily calm. Franklin looked around for any sign of the boat or his lover. Both gone. He was alone. The shore, now much closer from the storm's pounding. The sun, making its final retreat, now touched the horizon. "I can make it. I must make it," he said to himself, and began swimming hard for shore. After 25 minutes of hard swimming, his feet touched the sandy shore. The weight of his body returned as the drain of the hard swim overwhelmed him. He fell to his hands and knees, the waves crashing around him as he crawled the last few meters to the dry land. The life jacket came undone with a snap and fell back into the water. Franklin looked up at the sliver of sun disappearing below the horizon and smiled. He made it. A figure walked into his view and stood before him. "Help me!" he yelled, reaching out to her. "I'm a very important person. He cut off as he recognized the hazel eyes looking back at him. She walked forward and took his hand. With tears in her eyes, she said,
"Franklin Delano Roosevelt, you have failed your Probatus. You will now begin again."
In that moment, a lifetime of memories returned to Franklin, and he became aware. Darkness quickly descended upon him, and the cold water of the ocean was replaced by a dark, warm wetness. He found it difficult to move, and punched and kicked in all directions to no avail. The only sound was a deep pounding, like a resounding bass drum. The rhythmic beat and the gentle sway lulled him to slumber as all his memories faded, and he slept.